Hey guys, welcome back to the Odyssey podcast once again. First thing I want to say, whether you'll come to these episodes for our guests, or you come to support me and Jerome, or you just find it entertaining or insightful, whatever the case might be, we appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts. And with that said, I want to say, if you like the content, leave a like, subscribe, comment. All of these things help so that we could continue putting out these episodes for you all. So as per usual, we have another banger for you guys. We have with us in the studio Mr. J. Lovelace, a local artist who's achieved well-deserved global recognition. He's a dad, president of the Surfing Association, and a lecturer at UWI. Jay, thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here with you guys.
Thank you.
Like what you're doing.
Thank you. Right, so Jay, where I want to start is, even before art class and Mr. Hinkson, I want to start before there. What do you think are some of your earliest impressions that would have helped shape you into the person you are today, whether it be personality-wise or belief-wise or whatever the case might be?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. You know, I don't know if you know that I grew up in Matura, right? So I grew up in the countryside, quite humble beginnings. You know, we grew up without electricity for that entire experience in the country. Actually, when the later part of that experience, I was traveling to QRC from Matura, you know, and, you know, we were still living like kind of like that at that point. So that was an interesting transition. But, you know, so I would say as a young person at that time, which would have been the 70s, I guess, you know, my imagination would have been, that's probably the first signs of somebody that, you know, maybe your creativity and stuff is your imagination. I did a lot of things in my head. I would explore a lot of things, you know, spaces, places, you know, walking by rivers, going to, you know, pretending to be a warrior, pretending to be a scientist, you know, pretending to be an explorer, that kind of thing, you know. So a lot of role playing in a way and imaginative things. And I think that would be, in my head, looking back, probably the first signs of sort of a kind of imagination, which maybe then translated into being an artist.
Right, of course. Yeah. I'm going into like secondary school in QRC. What kind of person were you? What kind of student were you at that time? Yeah,
you know, I was quite a quiet person, you know. I mean, not very different from now in the sense that now, I mean, people find me quite big. I could be outspoken and social, you know, when I'm being social, but I think one has to remember that I spend most of my time alone, you know, because of the type of work that I do. Yes. I'm a painter, so most of my time is spent alone in the studio working. So I always probably blame blame that sort of enthusiasm when I'm around people on the fact that, you know, I spend so much time alone, so I need to counterbalance it with like giving a lot of love and hugs and being very animated, right. You know. I think at that age, however, I was a bit more, I'm a kind of middle of the road person, you know. Like I don't think I didn't have a ton of like groups of people who I hung out with. I was a bit of a loner, I would think, but I was still respected by the different groups. I wasn't like a good football player or anything, so it was like I was hanging out with the football players, but they liked me in a kind of odd way, you know, like, you know, as a kind of little oddity in a sense. I had big afro like this, and it was kind of, when I started surfing around then too, so I started to get kind of red. So I was a kind of, you know, strange looking little kid and not very big either. So yeah, I mean, and when I talk to people about that period as well, like their memory of me, it confirms that I was kind of like, you know, I was there, but I wasn't like very vocal about everything, but I wasn't also like absolutely reserved, you know, and it's kind of middle of the road, you know. Yes, looking to go to any side when needed, you know what I mean? And yeah, that experience in QRC was, I was traveling for the first part of it. I was traveling from Matura, so that alone made you sort of like you're in your kind of own zone. It's not like you're going to school, you have a bunch of friends who you're meeting up, so you had part of your life that was quite unique to you. And I knew that and realized that. And I guess the friends that I had later on, especially from Form 3, Form 4, the ones I can remember, were generally slightly, I would say, they were a little bit more odd in terms of the groups of people. They weren't necessarily athletes. They were mostly artistic, actually, coming to think about it. Artistic, either into music or into visual art. I became interested in visual art around Form 3 or Form 4. Mr. Hingston, Jackie Hingston, who is a well-known artist here, was my teacher, and I always credit that encounter with him in I think it's Form 3 or Form 4, credit that encounter with him to be like the beginning of my artistic journey, if you would, because he teach drawing in a particular type of way. And I remember him one class saying, we were drawing each other and like the students were drawing each other. And I'm not like a great draftsman, a little bit rough, but he said, there's something in these drawings. There's a spirit in these drawings, and I'll always remember it because I remember it made me think, boy, somebody's seen something in this. And I wasn't even seeing that thing. I mean, I was doing it with my full self. But to have somebody like a teacher say that, I remember it very clearly. I always remember it very, very clearly. Of a teacher, it was really important, and I literally took that moment and I kind of went with that. I ran with that from that moment. I haven't stopped since. I ran with that. I really did.
Wow, that's crazy. So you could tell me a little bit more about, I guess, in detail, how it was from being introduced to art to actually snowballing into liking it and having this love for it now.
Well, yeah.
In that period, not now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it was it wasn't like I was a natural artist. I didn't know that was what I was going to do, beforehand. I wasn't a kid that was drawing, for example. Usually you have a lot of kids, you see like a kid who is like 6 years old, 5 years old, all he likes to do is draw and stuff. You're going to be an artist for sure. I wasn't like that, I wasn't really making anything like visual. It's strange, but like I said, I was doing things that were imaginative, but in a different way. So the art, the visual art thing really wasn't there. And in retrospect, I do remember being drawn to visual art. Like, I have these faint memories of going to houses, that my parents or my dad, and he's a writer, as you know, so the circle would have been artistic circle. And whether visiting people, they would sometimes have paintings and painting collections and stuff on and things on the walls. And I remember looking at things on walls, now afterwards, I didn't know what I was doing then, but I was drawn to it, and afterwards I remember, I was quite drawn to paintings and to art that I saw in spaces, whether private spaces or whatever. And then of course, Leroy Clark, who was a family friend, from way back, and more or less would have known me as a child. I remember the first time that I saw a full-fledged exhibition that I could remember was his exhibition. I think it was in John Dollison Institute at that time. And it was a big exhibition called Duendes, the folkloric story of Duendes. And it was just, the scale of it was impressive and, unforgettable, really, big paintings, big oil paintings, this sort of whole mystical landscape that he creates from this mythology of Duendes, which is very rooted in, sorry about that, which is very rooted in Trinidad. So I remember that as being a kind of like, those things were adding up, those things were adding up, those experiences of looking at art, of just the people who were around. And then I think after that, it was really just in high school in QRC that started to take the art class and it started to reveal itself that maybe this is something that I could try, but I wasn't naturally good at it. I still don't think I am. I think the work that I've had to do to kind of get somewhere with it is really what has made it into something, and I think that is something to remember. I think when it comes to talent and what one might call raw talent, I mean, it'd be a natural draftsman, but because I've had to work to mine that inside of myself, to find that process actually becomes an interesting process because it doesn't come easy. So you really sort of discover a lot about yourself, and you discover a lot about the craft because you have to search for it. It's not there naturally. Yeah,
that's beautiful. That's kind of like those singers who just have a natural voice versus somebody who had to go to singing lessons and learn how to sing, But
to explore to explore something that you're not, you don't feel that gifted towards is a different kind of pursuit than if you feel like it just comes naturally to you, and one is not necessarily better than the other. You never know where these two parts may end up. It really depends on the work you do, whether you were talented. There are people who could draw better than me, but I don't think they have attained the level that I have in making art in general, because they kind of maybe took a different path, but it doesn't mean that they weren't talented, So I mean, for me, it always comes back to the time being put in and the exploration into the thing,
And how did you get into the surfing?
Surfing, yeah. Well, first, a small correction. I served as the surfing president for about.
Oh, you're not
I'm not. I think that's fine. That's fine. I served for about at least 8 years. I think it may be already 5 years since I'm not serving as the president, but interestingly, I got into surfing through my brother, right? This is while we were living in Matura. And my brother is a lot more athletic than me. He played basketball and, I was not quite athletic, Again, I'm more of a kid, more kind of working in his imagination and stuff, not really into team sports, at that age either. And he, for some reason, which I found very, up to today, I always find it such a strange and interesting impulse to sort of decide to go and buy a surfboard. I mean, surfing in those days is very, white, upper middle class. It's not the kind of thing that,
still a little bit.
Still, exactly. It's changed a lot, and actually a big part of that change was part of my generation coming up, and suddenly surfers look like everybody else too, and people realize that, hey, this is just not for one set of people, and that kind of thing. Especially when people of different ethnic backgrounds becoming like champion and stuff. It wasn't like a sport like that. It was a sport that anybody could do, and that was great. But the story of how it started is that he just, we used to see these guys going up to Toko because we live in Matura with the boards racked up on the top, and for some reason he just got curious about it, and he went and Walt is always an enterprising person. I think he was working he's always working in tech, like cameras and stuff like that, and I can't remember where he was working, but he made enough money to go and buy a surfboard on his own, and then he would just go out the road. We lived in a place called Francis Trace. He'd go at the front of Francis Trace and just stick his thumb out when those guys pass. And I just thought that was extremely brave, These people didn't even look like you, And they would stop, and then, he kind of started to get into surfing like that. I still think it's incredibly brave, because I don't think I would have done it, I think I've been way too shy to do that. Sure. And as a result, I was able to do it and to try it through, he had a surfboard and I took to it immediately. It was like, probably like the most immediate thing ever, like much more immediate than art, for example, I'm much more of a natural surfer than a natural artist. I stood on the board immediately, and I became, I progressed very quickly until by the time I was 16, 17, I was like both the the senior and the junior champion. Trinidad.
Wow.
Yeah, so I got good quickly, you know. But it was, I always say, I feel I was surfing in another life or something. It really does feel like it's something like like I knew, like I had a knowledge about it. I still feel like that, you know, very natural kind of thing. Yeah, and that's how that started. And then when I came into QRC, just around that time we were transitioning, you know, to my parents were kind of breaking up at that time as well. And I was around Form 3. So we were kind of moving into town. We needed to move into town because my sister at that point was going to school in town too. So the whole Matura experience was coming to an end. And at that point, I met some other surfers in QRC, you know. Not only that, they were also of different backgrounds, you know, Barry St. George and Danny Solomon, a few other people. And and then we became this whole new push of a sort of very colorful group of young surfers. And we sort of transformed, I would say we transformed the sport, you know, in Trinidad.
I heard you describe surfing as spiritual to you. What do you mean by that?
I feel very strongly about that aspect of surfing. Actually, that's the aspect of surfing that is most important to me. I never felt myself to be a really good competitor. I'm not a competitive person. I think I want to always grow, and I see myself as, you know, if you could surpass what you did yesterday, that's enough competition for me. I don't have to like compare it to someone. I mean, sometimes you could get a little drive from, you know, somebody doing something good, and it could inspire you to do good as well. But generally, I'm not competitive. So I think the whole competitive surfing part of me was really it was an opportunity to travel, to be part of something, and I had the talent, so I did it. I competed and I did pretty well, you know. But the more important part has always been this, you know, immersion into the ocean, into the water. You know, I mean, we know the importance of water in terms of things that are spiritual, baptism. I mean, you could make many parallels, right? And I don't want to get too like metaphysical about it, but
go there if you want to go there.
Yeah, but you know, I think water, you know, has this amazing ability to transform us, you know, and to renew us, you know. It's a kind of renewal every time I go into the water. So sometimes, like now, if things are becoming like you know, a little too intense in your head, or a lot of you know, life is becoming a little too stressful or something like that, the water is the place to go to. You know, I think everybody feels like that. Yeah, go to the beach and you come back and it's like a reset. You know, so as a surfer, the same thing happens in a sense. You know, I tend to you know, I tend to not like tons of crowds. So, you know, I see surfing also as a nice time to be alone sometimes. I mean, most of the time you're not surfing alone, but a lot of times I do. I like to escape to places alone, and it's like meditation and like communing with nature and stuff like that. So that's why I say it's kind of spiritual. I would say the ocean is like my cathedral. You know, I go there and I shed things, and I always feel I come back renewed. To face another day, to face the world. So it is a big part of my life, you know, now currently, as it's always been, even though, you know, like I say, the competitive side is less now.
Right.
Doesn't mean I can't come back and like beat a few people still. But that's never been the focus really for me. Yeah.
Do you think that the surfing has an impact on your art because of the movements and also like the scenery? Because obviously it's beautiful out there, and you know, and the colors, and does that have influence on it? Yeah, most definitely. And actually, I would even add that it's been a daunting subject to paint because of how powerful it is in reality for me. You know, how powerful the experience of being in the waters and being around nature is. How do I translate that, you know, into my art?
in a real deep way, not just like on a surface way, like a picture. A picture is a picture, but like how do I get into like the soul of it? How can I imagine that? What would my imagination like create if I was to think about it? So that has been a slow process of trying to see how surfing plays in. Now, I think it plays in unconsciously, obviously, because you are immersed in this medium of water, and then I always say with surfing you're always right on the level, the above and the below. You're right there. You're there. You go under. You come right back up. You're halfway in, halfway out. Always. So it's an interesting kind of zone to spend hours. Just being there. And yes, the colors, the experience of looking at nature around you, those things have fed into my work slowly. I think I'm considered and very like deliberate, meaning that things come in, but I don't rush things, So I think it's something that I want to do more. And actually I've recently started, I would say, my first set of paintings where I'm trying to really capture my version of what it is to be in the water and what it is to surf. I mean, it's taken me that long to be brave enough to do it, to feel like I'm good enough to actually try it. Because before I would, painting a picture of somebody riding a wave is still too literal for me. It's still too kind of like, I want to kind of go deeper than that. It has to be slightly more abstract. And, how can I make that into something that I could really feel? So that's where I am with that in terms of, having it as something that I might want to paint. So it is happening. And people always ask me, of course, because, I always say I'm split down the middle surfer artist. I've been doing the both of them just as long, well, probably even surfing probably even longer than I've been painting. So people always ask about it. And I always say the same thing, really. It's like, it's not an easy thing to bring in without being obvious, Yeah.
That's pretty cool that you've means so much to you that it'll take a while to actually put
that. Yeah. I think the things that are really meaningful to someone are the things you're the most careful with.
Yeah.
If you think you're something, you say, okay, well, I'll give it a shot. But the things that are really special to you, you want to do justice by them. You don't want to underrepresent the importance they have. So I think it's from that angle that I've always seen surfing. It's something that I don't want to underrepresent because, people will take it for what it is. But I know I know the depth of it within me. So I have to try to live up to that. As if I'm going to paint it or use it in art in any type of way. Yeah, true.
If you split down the middle. If you had to give up one, and you had to choose, just because.
That's a tough one. I mean, the truth is that, I wouldn't want to, but I think being an artist encompasses everything, for me. So I mean, if I stayed there, I would find a way to find a kind of flow with life and a kind of way to reflect life that made me feel connected to living and not disconnected. So I would say being an artist would always be, that would always be the thing that would stay, because, God forbid something happens and I can't surf, I would still be an artist, I mean, I'm hoping to surf till 103, but let's see how that goes. You'll check me back then.
We're going to check you for that. Will you want to go and surf the barrel waves in Tobago?
Yeah, I surf. No. I mean, barrel didn't really kick up too much fuss in Tobago, but I mean, I surf Tobago a lot for big swells but I mean, what I'm saying is that you go to South Pacific, you go to Hawaii, the waves people are surfing waves. Portugal has one of the biggest surf spots in the world called Nazarates. The waves are like 100 feet tall, 60 to mad. If you just go online and see, it's very, very intense, So you do have to. For me, it's important to, I would say, gauge my limit. you know, in terms of what I would want to do, where I think this is still fun. You know, after that, I'm not interested in trying to do something that's going to threaten my life. I mean, there's always some risk in surfing, yes, but I'm not going to go to the point where, you know, like, yeah, no, that has never been of interest to me, really.
So you don't have that chase for like that the biggest wave?
Nah. I just love doing the thing. You know, I love moving along the water and you know, turning the board, and I like the way the sun looks and the weather looks, and you know, everything in the water is like a magical place. You know, I'm more interested in that rather than like challenging to ride the biggest waves and stuff. So it's more the kind of visceral experience of surfing is very important for me. Yeah, I think that I always, you know, of course, when I'm not doing it, I miss. You know, yeah.
Not really the thrill seeking. You
know? Nah, not so much in not so much that.
That's better that
way. So you tell me if I'm overstepping here, right? But how was your parents' breakup on you in that period?
Well, I mean, I think any breakup with parents is, you know, I think it affects people differently. You know, in later years now, I realized that that something we don't speak about or we process in a direct way is trauma, you know, and I start to kind of become more comfortable talking about trauma and thinking about it, you know, about what affects you, because, you know, there's part of you know, when a marriage breaks up or, you know, your parents break up, part of it is like, I think it's better this way, you know, because there might have been, you know, quarreling and you'll have that kind of tension, you know, all the time. And that is not a healthy environment after a while, you know. And in a kind of way that teaches you a little bit about human nature is that, you know, sometimes just like friendships could work for a certain time. Sometimes people grow apart. Mm-hmm. These types of things, you know, so you kind of come to some of those understandings, I guess, via these sort of big events in your life, like, you know, like a breakup with your parents, you know, between your parents. But it also, what it sometimes doesn't address is the effect on you, you know, and like how you internalize certain things and, you know, how it affects your own behavior moving forward. So, you know, and people close to me always say, you know, well, you know, it probably affects you a lot more than you think, you know, in terms of like how you behave at certain times and certain things like that. And those are things that I've become more aware of now, you know, in terms of being cognizant of that, of maybe where it's coming from, so that I can face it, you know, and to not be to not be afraid to admit to having some trauma, you know, from one thing or the other in your life, you know, and then I notice it in other people, you know, and I notice other people in my family. I you know, whereas you might think, well, where is this coming from? And then you think, okay, you know, maybe there are places that it comes from, and maybe it is something that needs to be processed and spoken about and dealt with, you know, for you to move forward, you know, and grow into a new space. So yeah, I mean, that is something that you know, we live with and we are processing all the time, I think, you know. And I think the main thing is that people could grow and that you want to see your parents, even though they grow apart at that time, that, you know, you stay respectful to each other, or at least you grow back into that space, you know, because you did have kids together and you obviously had an experience, a long experience together. You know, you don't want, I think it's unfortunate when that remains like a chasm, like a break, you know, like it's never going to, you know. I think it's good to see people kind of accept each other, you know, despite the differences and what has happened. That's a nice place to go to, you know. They're friends that I maybe have grown apart from, but I still respect them and love them and say, yeah, you know, I have to let that go. It's part of that go, but, you know, I still respect them and I will still help, and if I could help. So yeah, I think that teaches, you know, when you witness something in your life, like a breakup of parents and stuff like you're close right there. It does help you to analyze your own relationships moving forward, you know, and how you deal with them. You know, you have to learn from the things you see, I guess, you know, you have to learn as much as those things do affect you and could possibly make you repeat them, you know, so we have to be careful of that, of course.
Answer Shana.
Yeah, man.
So you have to go back to the story.
Just jump back to like Form 4, something like Form 3 when you moved back to town. That was Form 3 or Form 4.
So yeah, around Form 4, we would have kind of moved into Port of Spain, you know, by that time. So like for the first couple of years, I was kind of moving back and forth. It was an interesting period, you know, and I think back to it now, it was a little rough, you know, because I was kind of staying, you know, with an aunt down in Digo. Then I would be staying with some friends in Marval, and it was just friends of the family. And, you know, I think my parents were just trying their best to see how this guy could just, you know, just kind of keep this thing, you know, keep going to school. And I wanted to go. Curiosity was my first choice. I remember that, and I passed it, and I was surprised because I don't think myself as an academic person, but, you know, maybe I put the effort out to get to that goal, you know, and I got there, and we had to make it happen, you know. But around that time, my dad started to teach at the university, and I think he got like tenure or whatever. So it became, you know, all of a sudden we became like proper middle class Port of Spain people. You know? Yeah. And it's right there. I've stayed ever since. Here I am.
You did Form 6?
I didn't do Form 6. So yeah. So the story with me and that is that I've always had this, you know, I don't know, like my decision making is strange when I look back on it. And what is interesting though for me is that there was a certain amount of freedom given, you know, from my parents. I think because maybe they were very free-spirited in some ways. I mean, at the same time, you know, specific about certain things that, you know, they thought they needed to share with us growing up and stuff like that to help us along, you know, to become better people, etc., etc. There was still not this sort of pressure to, well, you have to do this way and this way, you know. They themselves were kind of like figuring out life too, I guess, you know. I mean, people are, you know, and so I remember when I decided that I wasn't going to do sixth form in QRC, like I just said, I started to become good in surfing, and I said, you know what? I had gotten into art. I started to make art on my own a little bit. I said, you know what? I'm just going to take what I said is I'm going to take a year break and I'll come back to it.
The old trick.
Yeah. And I had done the one of the justifications, or my justifications internally was that I had done the 11 plus, what we call 11 plus exam, a little younger. So I did it like around 10. Just because the school I was going to was closing. It was in Grandie. And anyway, I did it a little younger than I should have. So I was a very young student. So by the time I was out of fifth form, I was only about 16, you know. And I thought I could give myself a year and still come back. I'll be young, you know, and do the sixth form. And I was surfing competitively. I became like national champion, and I started to try to look for sponsors. And I actually traveled a bit. I went to California on 2 occasions in the late 90s and was doing a sort of like semi-pro surfing and stuff like that. And I just never made it back to sixth form. You know what I mean? It just like 2 years passed, and then shit, and you know, so those 3 years seemed like a decade of experiences. It's so strange, you know. We were just talking about how fast 10 years passed now, like how, you know. I mean, I'm not saying that a lot hasn't happened for me in the last 10 years, but like in those days, I just found like that little space between 16 or 17 and 20. Is so many things happened, you know. It felt like a decade of things happened because I was surfing, and I kind of went through this process of competing and traveling, and I liked it. But then around 2021, I was just like, well, you know, I'm never really I'm not like a competitive person. And I know this is like, I'm going to have to take it up a notch if I'm going to really crack into like any kind of level. I mean, I have the talent, but the work is what I'll have to do now, you know? And I was just like, boy, I wonder if if I'm really cut out to do this amount of work as an athlete. I love surfing. I'll always have surfing. So I kind of made a decision at that time. I actually thought it through, and I said, well, I will have surfing forever because I will never stop surfing. It'll keep me, you know, I'll stay fit enough to surf. Hopefully something that I'll have for my entire life. So I'm not going to lose that. But art is something that if I need to get better at it, I will need to like focus on it, you know? So around 2021, I decided I'm going to phase away from trying that the competitive surfing, and I would try to get into art school. And my parents didn't have a lot of money. They didn't have any money to like put me through a art school or something. So what happened is that I went to the French. Yeah, I went to Martinique. I went to Martinique.
I know, there's a story there of how that came to be.
Yes, that's an interesting story, because what happened is that, of course I was a bit of a dreamer, I still am. So I was like, you know, and I'm thinking of all the French painters and, you know, thinking of European painters, saying, my God, wouldn't it be amazing to go to school in France, you know? I mean, I had these lofty dreams, but I mean, totally unrealistic in terms of like financially and everything. And, but it's good sometimes to have that dream, because it did lead me to speak to the people at the French, the cultural attaché here at the Alliance Française here in Port of Spain. At those times, they used to have a cultural attaché, somebody who was actually just there to talk about cultural affairs and cultural exchanges, you know, in Trinidad. And I went to see him. I can't remember his name. And I went to see him, and we spoke about the schools, and he said, well, you know, yeah, I mean, of course, France, it's going to be very, very expensive to get into these schools there. And he said, but there's this school in Martinique that's only about 10, at that time it was only about 10 or 15 years old. And he said, if, you know, it's worth looking into, because I think once you could get into that school, tuition is free. And, you know, you'll just have to pay. Yeah, you'll just have to pay, you know, just to live and everything. And the sixth form thing came back to haunt me, because the entry for that is you have to have done sixth form. Right? And I was like, damn, you know, because I didn't do the sixth form, you know, because generally you'll do sixth form, then you go into university, right? So I had to find a way around it. And what I did is that there was somebody from the cultural ministry in Martinique who was visiting Trinidad. They were actually coming to the opening of an exhibition by Jackie Hinkson, who was my teacher, right? And he was doing an exhibition at the Alliance Française. They used to be on Pembroke Street at that time, on the upper Pembroke Street. They had a space there, and they used to do exhibitions. And she was coming. Her name was Dominique Brebillon. And Madame Brebillon was coming, and they said to me, well, you know, go talk to her, because she's in touch with the people at the school, the director of the school, and, you know, and I basically got a stack of my photographs of my paintings together. I'd been painting, you know, I'd been painting over the few years, making a little portfolio of work. And I had these pictures, not in any album, just a little stack in a nice little envelope, just like you get it in Photomart. And I walked with that to the exhibition opening, and I met her, and I said, you know, I'm really interested in going to the school in Martinique, you know. And I said, if you would, can you please take these pictures up and give it to the director was Maurice Xavier, was the director of the school. And I said, if you could give it to Mr. Xavier, that would be great. And I would love to try whatever I need to do. I don't know, but at least this shows what I'm doing, you know. And in those days, this is before the internet, before email and stuff. It's kind of like, I think it's before email. When did email?
Late 90s.
I ain't sure.
Exactly. So this would have been before that.
So you just have to put your phone number on the envelope.
Yeah, put a phone number, stick a little thing there, and then later, that's like a couple months later, they called. The school called, and they and somehow the timing was right, because they were interested in opening the school up a little bit more to the rest of the Caribbean. It's a French school. being taught in French, obviously, and because Martinique is a department of France, right? So it's not independent. So the good thing is that you get the same diploma as you would have gotten in France, which is really cool. But you're in the Caribbean, and I think they were interested at that time in opening up the school to maybe some English-speaking students, but the students who would have to, of course, learn French. So the timing was good. There was this idea of, as we always have, this idea of the Caribbean kind of coming together and doing more, being more in touch, in terms of the island. Something that's a dream we always had, and sometimes that dream gets delayed, when Federation didn't work and these different, we have CARICOM now, which is great. But I think that's always something that the Caribbean has always wanted to do. It's like, how can we have more inter-Caribbean dialogue? And the art schools and the schools and education is a big place where that could happen. So I was lucky that type of spirit was alive there, and they did accept me into the school. And, I tried to brush up on my French. And I went up, just went up and went into a whole new world, really. It was quite interesting and isolating because, when I went there, I realized, wait, I can't talk French at all.
How was that?
It was just very, very intense, but it was, I have this kind of belief that if you want to do something, you have to sacrifice something. You have to go through some kind of initiation, It just doesn't just land on your lap, And every story that I had read about artists, they always seem to have gone through something to forge them, to make them into who they are, And I said, well, if this is what it looks like, this is what it looks like, I'll have to face it, And I think I'm strong enough to face it. And I remember going up there and feeling like, okay, this is really a new chapter. I'm totally alone here. I know nobody in this entire place. I can't talk the language. So imagine how introspective you become. And I remember seeing this dog. This is the first thing I stayed in a student lodging before I could find a place. It's like a kind of hostel almost in Fort-de-France. And I remember like the first night I got there, I went outside with my sketchbook, and of course, I'm just kind of romantic guy. I'll come over with a sketchbook and I'm gonna draw. I'm gonna be an artist now, Let me get on with it, you know what I mean? Really, really crazy, man. And then there was this dog. I'll never forget this because it turned into a whole series of paintings and drawings of this dog that was hurt. The dog was dying, and I was just there, and I just felt like, oh my God, I just connected with this dog. And felt quite sad and reflective, and I don't know, maybe just where I was at that point in my life, just was very emotional. So I made some sketches of this dog, and I couldn't do anything to save the dog. And those drawings of that dog became a whole series of like stray dogs that I made during that year. And that was my first year in Martinique. And I trod my way through. Within 3 months, I was talking enough to get by. I was doing classes on the side. I got one of the other students to, hire her, like give her some money on the side to give me some classes. I would sleep with the headphones on, the radio. So I would hear the language over and over, like in my head. Yeah. And it really helped. And in about 3 months, I remember people used to say, tu parles français? And I'll be like, un petit peu, and then just smile, a little bit, and then smile. For about 3 months, I said nothing but that. And I was going to class, and I just had to, it's amazing what instinct can do, because, you're in a class, you're understanding everything, but you're picking up things, and it's art class, so, you could kind of figure things out, and, but after 3 months or so, I did get the language a little bit under control, and then I ended up getting a scholarship from the second year, which was really helpful because it was still expensive for us, like to live, pay lodging and everything. Food is expensive. Martinique is quite expensive. But the French are good with support like that. You could apply, and if you have the grades, you could get through with some support. And I got some support for the rest of my tuition, rest of my schooling over there. So I was very fortunate. And of course, the same thing happened. I did the bachelor, what would be equivalent of the Bachelor of Arts, which is just over 3 years. They said, stay for the 2 years and do the master's. And I was like, nah, we'll come back to it.
Another
and and I left and I came back to Trinidad, and those 2 years were were 2 difficult years. I was like, man, I should have well stayed over there and finished this thing. But in the end, it led me, my work kept moving forward, despite the circumstances, despite, if you second guessed a decision, about what you should or shouldn't have done, there was growth, and when I look back at it now, it kind of all makes a little more sense,
How did you support yourself when you came back and being a film?
That's a good one, boy. I know it's a great question, and it's one that I sometimes ask myself now, looking back, because you wonder, like, how did you survive all this time? Because living is not cheap, and I know many artists and young artists who really suffer because they want to do this thing, but they just can't find a way to make it work because they have pressure from every side. Their parents, hey, you didn't go to school to just come out and like just, you need to do something and you need to make something for yourself, I would say that 2 things that are important about that. One is that I knew that I was not letting go of it. I wasn't going to go through this and start this journey and then let go of this journey because it's going to be hard now and I wasn't making any money. I was quite frustrated with the paintings I was making. I couldn't sell any of those paintings or anything, a few people would support every now and then. I might make a sale, but I myself wasn't even that satisfied with the work, So I had to kind of find a way to fund my way through this growth period. And stay in it, stay really in it. I think I kind of did a lot of odd jobs, but that were around the creative industry. So whether it's in, helping out with sets, set design for theater, whether it was, my brother worked in video, film and video. So I might get a little pull out there to wrap cable and, be part of production team, production assistants. I found whatever I could find to kind of keep some resources coming in while I kept at the work, And in terms of the paintings themselves, there would be a few brave people that would support every now and then, And I have to mention too that when I was still in in first year at art school, those paintings of the dogs that I had made, it was quite a prolific body of work. It's like a lot of paintings to make in 1 year, and it was very focused. And I also felt like I had to prove myself, because I kind of came in there a little bit sideways. They were almost threatening to not give me a diploma because I didn't come through. I didn't have the sixth form, but I had some good alliances there. And people in the end said, you got to give this guy his due, even though it wasn't the textbook entry into the school. But that work, those paintings became a large body of work. And when I came back on summer vacation from Martinique, there was a gallery called Aquarella Gallery that was a well-known gallery here for showing up-and-coming and established contemporary art. They gave me a solo exhibition, and that was really encouraging, meaning that, I got a space. I got an entry into the world of art here as a young artist, really. And I think, like most of the things that have happened since then, it was the work itself that led that. It wasn't like it was something that I had to negotiate or anything like that, or that I was even necessarily looking for. But thankfully, the work led and the opportunity came. So that also was encouraging, meaning that I would have sold a few things. So there was always in the background, there was always a bit of sale happening with my work from day one. Actually, I remember before I even went to school in those late 80s, before I went to art school, I remember selling one painting in a young artist exhibition from that same gallery. And it was me and these other young artists, D. Landon, and a couple other people who now, some of them are still practicing. And I remember selling a painting I will never forget it, nice size painting, oil painting of, it's called Crab and Crab Catchers, you know, so it's these crabs and you see these guys with crab catchers with like flambeaus in the background and stuff like that. And somebody bought it, actually a gentleman called Joseph Fernandez, who I know very well still, a good friend of mine, bought it. And that was so encouraging because it was like, and I think he paid like $2,300 for it in those days. And that was like good for a young person, first time exhibiting. Yeah. So I always say, you know, boy, I thought, well, that's it. I know this is going to work. And, you know, I mean, it was a kind of, you know, a false dream because, you know, afterwards it became very, very difficult to keep up sales and stuff like that. But it was encouraging to see that it was possible to get some support for what you were doing. And, you know, years after that, I think that pattern repeated itself. You know, there would be some support, but then there would be periods when you really had to find, you really had to find your own momentum. And I mean, over the years, I've taught surfing. You know, I started to get into teaching surfing. That actually was quite successful because, you know, I love surfing and I could teach it. So, and I had a period of maybe 3 years when I was teaching surfing where I had these great experiences with students. You know, I would pick them up and we would go. Most of them are people I would pick up and I would take on 4 people at a time, whoever could fit in my truck. So one in front, 3 in the back. And we would hit the beach and it was exhausting, but it was really, really good. You know, it was I'm very happy that I had that period of my life. And, you know, the people that I shared that with, don't ever forget it, you know. For years after, people still would call me, hey, you doing surfing lessons? I say, no, I stopped doing the lessons. Stopped doing the lessons, you know. So that I got into teaching at UE. That also helped, you know, supplement my income a bit, you know, at those times. And then, and that kind of takes me into later on here now when you know, the work has started to kind of gain its own momentum. So I'm able to like make a living from selling the paintings and from the opportunities that making paintings offer. So,
I don't know, being a successful painter to me is so crazy. It's always something I've thought of, even though I'm not in any creative field or anything like that. It's always been something I thought of. And there's so many great artists, very talented artists who nobody would buy anything from them, right? So clearly, it's like a whole package deal as an artist. You are, I guess, portraying to people. So what are the other elements to your package?
You know, I don't know if I agree because I feel that, I actually think that the work is the most important thing. And the reason I say that is because in some ways, that's the thing that leads the discussion, you know? I mean, even if somebody's really cool, like I actually thought, a good example of this is that, you know, let's say in my 30s or I was kind of hair established. I mean, I've had the exhibitions. I wasn't like somebody making tons and tons of exhibitions, but people would say to me, you know, Che, you know, he's a charismatic fella. Why don't make some paintings we could collect? You know, we could buy. You know, these things I can't get into. You know, so they might like you, but they may not really get it with the paintings that you're making. You know, and that actually happened to me because I was doing my own thing and I was adamant about just doing it my way. I'm happy that I did because I learned a lot about, you know, myself and about what I was trying to make and discovering myself, you know, and I needed to take that particular path, you know. Sometimes I was almost like, why am I taking this difficult road? You know what I mean? Like, I know this is going to be tough and still I'm going and do it, you know, but that's it, you know, and I think in the end, I'm really happy that I did, but I'm just saying that, you know, people might have liked me as a person, but still found it hard to support the work that I was doing. I think the work had to get to the point where, you know, it kind of led. And then, you know, it didn't matter whether, you know, there was somebody you liked behind it or not, but the work was leading. And I think that's where the work is now, in a sense. It's kind of, you know, an audience caught up with it, or it caught up with an audience. I don't know how to look at it. But, and it also had to do with my own growth, because, I like I was telling you earlier, I don't believe in rushing a step, I don't believe in jumping forward to a thing that you imagine in the future. You have to kind of take these steps to get to that thing in the future, even though sometimes you could imagine what it looks like. You just got to make sure that you have a solid pathway, and that when you climb one step, that you're not sliding back down to go back up again. So I think it's been a very considered, slow process, but the things that I've learned, I've really learned. And I feel like at some point that started to really come together in my paintings. The way that I make paintings, the format, everything started to just gel. And I felt that growth. And that actually became a very important or joyous moment for me. Because I felt like, no matter what happened, I could feel this growth internally. I could feel this thing moving forward. I could feel these little breakthroughs happening, and whether anybody else was seeing them, I was feeling them. And I was, I've been in touch enough with myself to be aware of those little breakthroughs. And that gives you a sense of like stability and, purpose, okay, I'm making some steps here, and that's it. And then, of course, that then coincided with people also finding it a bit more accessible, or somehow liking the work more in terms of, whether exhibiting it or having a conversation about it.
So was there like a big break? Like a specific moment where things...
Yeah, there was actually. What happened is that during COVID, COVID actually was an interesting period because the work had been growing and kind of developing, but then COVID happened, and I thought, my God, well, this is it here now, hard times coming will be real tough because, nobody's studying art now. This is a big global pandemic. Nobody had time for that. And so I thought, I started to buckle down. At this point, I have a son, who is, my son is now 15, so he would have been like, like 10 or whatever at that time at the beginning of COVID. So I have somebody to mind, I have rent to pay for the studio. I have bills. So it was a little concerning, when it happened. However, I've suffered from anxiety a lot in my life, about like the life of an artist. It could really get the better you sometimes because of the, it's not, things are not sure, In 1 minute you can be making something, the next minute you might not have anything for months, and longer. So it's that type of instability can be taxing mentally, and I've had moments where like periods in my life I would get up every day, I would be like crying, and like I don't know why, why am I so emotional about this whole thing? And it was, but the good thing is that I was feeling where I was, and I was aware of it. I wasn't kind of bypassing it, I was kind of facing up with it or facing up to it. But there was a lot of anxiousness, over the years. And during COVID, that kind of, I thought, well, shit, this is going to be bad. But what it did, because the world kind of stopped and things got really quiet, I got an opportunity to just look at what I had and really focus and start to sort of finish these paintings that I've been working on. Making art is one of the things I like the most about it. It's a constant process of discovery. It never stops. You never really get to somewhere. You get to somewhere and then you can say, hey, this is where I am. You could show something at that point. But the actual practice is something that is ongoing and dynamic all the time. So, getting a chance to, when the world quiets down, to look at what you've been working on for the last several years and really studying it without distractions, and I tend to work really good with total immersion. I guess everybody does. Yeah. Total immersion into what you're doing, without distractions for a while. So, some good things can happen, or some type of clarity can come from that. So that time actually turned out to be a very pivotal time because I managed to finish a lot of paintings. And I felt like I was breaking some ground with the quiet of the world, and with this extra, time on my hands where I wasn't breaking the momentum of painting, with having to go down the road. I mean, I almost felt like, I wasn't seeing my son as much and you couldn't move around as much. Remember, there were a lot of restrictions for movement, but I really tried to just relish in that instead of like making it a problem. I said, yeah, okay, I'm going to stay here. So this is my world now. The studio is my world. And I literally lived in the studio and the work that came out of that reflected that. There was really something had happened. And so if there was a big break, it really happened just coming out of COVID. Actually, when COVID was we still had travel restrictions. Somebody had seen, before COVID, somebody had seen an exhibition I had done. And I think it was at the Loft Gallery, yes. And we just kind of kept a conversation going, and he knew somebody from a gallery in Los Angeles. And, it's pretty amazing how, a casual conversation, but I mean, it's really about preparation, the work was ready. I mean, if the work wasn't ready, that conversation would have just kind of like fizzled, but because the work was kind of ready, it turned into a discussion. And I looked at the gallery, who I still currently work with, one of the galleries I work with called Various Small Fires, VSF. And they at that time, all the studio visits and the conversations were all Zoom. Remember, that was a new phenomenon, right? Before, when you did a studio visit, you'll go to the studio of the person, you'll look at their work, you'll talk to them. That's how most things operated in the art world. But during COVID, that shifted. And I always tell people, I think that really benefited artists who weren't in the center, who were in the peripheral, because, whether you were in New York or in London or in Trinidad, you're using the same platform to talk, to show your work. So studio visits via Zoom became a phenomenon. And I think a lot of us profited from that in the sense that, we were now on the same platform as everybody else, So people kind of looked at it with equal eyes. So I had a studio visit from this gallery during that time. And it was really positive, and that started it. That moment you've been waiting for your entire life, you say this person is going to stand behind you and they like what you do and they're going to support it. And they want to do an exhibition, and we're going to do a solo exhibition, just your work. And we still had travel restrictions at that time. I remember the meeting too. The meeting was interesting because, after a while with Zoom visits and stuff, because it's not a person you're talking to, you start to feel like you're just talking to yourself kind of, and I remember like kind of losing myself in my own dialogue in a sense, talking about my work with the camera, going through the studio, showing them paintings. The next day I wrote to them and I said, thanks for the opportunity to show the work, to show you the work and speak with you and whatnot. Even though towards the end I felt like I was losing, like I was losing you, and I was losing myself in my own voice, and I remember sending in that email, a link to Derek Walcott's Nobel Prize speech, which is a speech that I really like, when he talks about, the Caribbean as fragments that you put together, and the glue that you use to recreate that shape, and the love is stronger than its original shape because you put it back together. Talk about fragments, and that's so powerful. That really, to me, speaks about us and about the Caribbean identity, if you would. So I put that in there, and I had a quote, and I think that helps because I think it just gave that extra backup to what they had experienced the day before, in terms of what I was trying to maybe explain with my work. My work comes together in panels and parts, you know? Panels. Yeah, the panels always, so it's like these parts are always trying to sort of create a harmonious whole. So it made sense. And the next day they started by saying, we will pretend. And then within a few days, they were like, yeah, we want to do like something bigger. And so I felt very relieved because I thought this was the beginning of a new journey here. And it has been. Yeah.
Oh, how did that feel after all these years of ups and downs? Finally getting
it's, what is interesting is that I had kind of let go at some point before that. Yeah. When I say let go, that anxiousness that I had, I told you about, where I would have anxiousness, wake up with anxiousness, wake up anxious about what was going to happen next, about, just worried, that persisted for quite a while. And I was like, God, I wanted to get rid of it, but it just kept coming on, it kept coming on its own, really. And, I felt like once I started I could feel growth in the work. And remember that what I was telling you a little bit about when the work was starting to really gel internally. Like I felt like I was growing. It wasn't like anybody was around me saying, hey, this is looking good. It was something that was happening in the studio that I felt in touch with. That put me at ease a bit. So people would say, Che, how you going? And I would be like, things are going good. Even though, I was a little nervous about money. I was a little nervous about keeping the studio going. A little nervous about taking care of my son. I felt that I have to be able to stand on this ground, which was the ground offered to me by the work that I was doing. It was the ground, the stability of like, hey, this is evolving, and you have to give yourself that at least, you have to give yourself a little respite. You can't be stressing about everything, about every little moment, every little element of putting your life together and making it perfect or whatever. You have to give yourself this. And so maybe be real happy that this is growing, be real happy and thankful and grateful and keep working at that. And I think that is when I let go a bit. And somehow or the other, I felt things was going to work out at that point because I just felt like, somebody's going to see it, somebody's going to notice that this is going somewhere, and they did, they did, they noticed.
You talked about like finishing your art, and something I always wondered was like, how do you know when it's done? Because you can just keep it's a question often asked about art, and it's a good question, maybe one that is really hard to answer, but I feel like it's there is some sense of resolution to an artwork where, yes, you might be able to put another layer on, just like our lives, because you could say I'm in a good place in my life now, but it doesn't mean that you can't add something, good or bad, something that might spoil it, and paintings are like that, you might get to this point, it's good, and then you have to know, well, this becomes a snapshot of this dynamic process, and I think that's the best way for me to explain it. It's at some point you say, I'm going to stop here, because I will let this moment freeze in time, and I will go on to something else to continue the discussion, or to continue the exploration or the investigation that you are interested in. Whether I'm painting people or whether I say, okay, I like where this is right now. Yes, I could add something, but and I mean, there's some formal aspects to painting where there's a balance achieved that people could talk about. When you look at it, it's sort of like, even if it's not symmetrical, there's a symmetry in the asymmetry, if you would, which is something artists sometimes strive for, to find something that has tension. So it's not, it's not overly perfect, but there's something that's resolved about the stage of the work. And then at that point, you look at it enough and you say, okay, I'll leave this here.
It's a kind of fascinating thing, really, because, you know, you have to kind of, you know, your decision to leave it there becomes the final act of kind of closing it off, you know, and you have to kind of, you have to have that belief. And that belief then, you know, transmits to the audience looking at it, you know, because there's some things, especially like how I paint, you know, it's not, I don't make paintings that are close-ended, you know, like everything, like I'm trying to make a picture. There are parts of my paintings that are dripping away, you know, a face might be here, you might see the eyes, and then the mouth kind of like goes like, but it's expressing something, you know, and you have to know, like when do I stop? Do I want to make it more realistic, or do I want to leave it as loose as it is, you know? And sometimes that looseness is quite elegant, you know, and quite beautiful in its own way. So you have to be able to identify that. So I think maybe a big part of it is that how do I identify the things that are beautiful to me? And when I achieve that, so then I could stop, you know? If you don't know, if you can't identify it, you're going to just keep going. Yeah. And then you realize, shit, you know, you've just totally passed the thing, you know, which has happened to me too. You know, it's a learning process where I've overworked something. Yeah, so I do tend to take photographs of the stages of the paintings so I can look back. And then sometimes I look back and say, shit, man, screw this up, you know? And it has happened a few times. It's very frustrating. So you really want to kind of be in tune with the process so that you could kind of identify like, okay, this is coming there. And sometimes what you need for that is time. You know, you need time to reflect. I think before I was a little too impulsive and quick, you know, with paintings, but now I spend a long time on the paintings, and that helps me to identify when something has happened that I like, you know, by looking at it over and over. I say, okay, I like this. I'm pretty sure I like this, you know. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers the question somewhat.
I actually have a follow-up question for that. I remember, I'm not an artist, so I don't know. I just thought of this. But like, is there, especially because I saw you take like a year and a half on average per piece. Like, do you develop a relationship with it? Like, is it hard to let go of it at the end of it?
Yeah, I mean, you get possessive with paintings. I would say yes, because, you know, they are part of your growing. You know, they become part of, you know, how you're expressing yourself. So there is an attachment to them. However, there's part of, you know, of your being, which is like, hey, this is what I do. This is what I share with the world. So that the other part is about sharing, you know. There's one thing about possessing, but there's another part about sharing. And the part about possessing is like, you know, oh God, I would like to keep this, you know. But I also, I'm drawn to this idea of sharing, you know, something that you've done and letting it free into the world so that people could reflect on it. And then they themselves can own it in some ways by seeing it and by having you know, whether it's an internal discussion about it or liking it or not liking it, or some kind of conversation coming out of it, you know. And that is something that the type of artist that I am, where I make exhibitions and I sell the work, or the work goes to different places, or it goes into different situations, whether it goes to institution or it goes to a private home or whatever. That's part of what I do. So I have to kind of know that, you know, I'm not going to get so tied to something where I don't want to let go of it. But I do, there are things that I keep. You know, and I think all artists keep. And people have always advised me that you should keep every body of work that you make, you should keep at least a certain percentage of that work for yourself. It's just a good practice, you know. So keep a few paintings. You made 12 big paintings, maybe keep 2, you know, and keep them, and then let the other 10 look, you know, into the world. So that's something that I do. I've tried to keep some key pieces, so that I can have those, and it can be if you would, a record of my own development, and I will have it close to me. Yeah.
And on like the commercial side of it, like how does like an exhibition work, and like how do you come up with the prices? And then, like, I don't know.
I mean, pricing in art is very varied, and I mean, the best way I can explain is that I feel like there's several art worlds almost. You know, I mean, there's one art world, but there's several components to it. People doing different types of things, different types of economies around it. You know, some people are doing things that are. Some people are selling art online. You know, I tend to not, you know, be that attracted to online, like as a place to sell, even though people use PDFs and JPEGs to sell art now, which is, you know, in earlier days that was not something that happened. You have to see a work in real life, and for the most part, most work is sold by looking at it in physically, you know, in person. In terms of pricing and how that works, I mean, as I'm sure you're aware, you know, you hear about these auction prices of millions of dollars for valuable paintings. I think art has been given a certain stature of something that's very precious and very important. And I'm not going to quarrel with that. I think it is, because it is the story of humanity. It's the story of societies. It's the story of our evolution, how we think. You know, it's very nuanced. It changes between locations and cultures, and then for the most part, it's unique. You know, it's like you have this one unique thing that lasts through time, and that, you know, 200 years from now we're going to look at it. So it accumulates value, and I'm not saying that parts of that are not exaggerated. Like most things, you know, people can really overdo it with the overpricing something, and I don't know, whatever value systems that people attach to objects can become, I would say, unreasonable or lopsided, or not based on something that I feel is, you know, true enough. But the truth is that art is valued, you know, and I agree with that valuing. And, you know, I think in terms of like how a young artist would start, you just start somewhere, you know, and then you just start to build. And it is a tricky space. And it's not a space that I am myself, I'm completely figured out, but I understand the basics of it, in the sense that you have a value for what you do, and you slowly try to make that value go up as you move forward. You definitely want it to sort of go up. You know, you don't want it to go down or just stagnate either. You want it to kind of accumulate in value somehow there. That's what happens generally with artists, I think. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not interested in, you know, I don't need to get to the point where, you know, only 3 people in the world could afford to buy a painting, you know? I mean, I think you could make a good living as an artist where people could afford it. Well, I mean, even if not everybody could afford it, some people could afford it, you know? And, you know, I have always collected art, for example, right? And I've never had a big budget to collect art. I would buy paintings, and I still buy paintings now I would buy paintings for, you know, maybe up to $7,000-8,000 or something, but generally I'd buy something for about $3,000 in Trinidad dollars, and I collect like young artists and, you know, things that I like and little things that I pick up from here and there. I guess if I had a bigger budget, or, you know, when I have a bigger budget, that can reflect in the things that, you know, you are able to collect and have close to you. So and like in my career, for example, I've had many young people buy art from me, and those are sometimes the most rewarding sales, because I think they really bought those paintings because they really liked what they saw. They liked what I was doing, and they wanted to be part of that. And a lot of those were sold on like down payments, you know. Pay me like $500 every month for a couple of years, and we pay it off, you know, and then you own this thing. And I found that so encouraging and you know, uplifting, you know, that people make that commitment, especially young people, when they made that commitment to buying something from me. And I never forget that. So I hope that answers the question a little bit. Like, there are so many different, layers to this. Of course, when you start to work with art galleries, that's a business on itself, right? So these are people who are, connected to the art world, connected to people who are investing and buying in art. I mean, there's corporations that buy art, there's private collectors that buy art. It's a big world, because I mean, most of the buildings you go into, you see art.
Yeah.
Anywhere in the world. So that's in itself is a huge part of where people may place paintings, but of course private people as well. And then institutions like museums and stuff also acquire art, which is also, I would always say it's a very coveted place for artists to be, because in a museum, the work is exposed to the public. The public gets to see the work, hopefully much more than they would if it was in a private place where it's just like one person sees it, or one group of people see it. So it's a kind of democratic way to have your art displayed, like in a museum or something. Yeah. So
isn't that also kind of like marketing? People come in the museum and seeing your art and saying, maybe I should go and buy a painting.
Well, I think it's more like the painting becomes part of a history. It's part of a larger dialogue. So it's not even about like going to buy it, but about, I mean, that might happen as well, but I think the museum context seems to me to be more about being written into a bigger dialogue about art. That's done from an institutional level, like an institution which is bigger than a person in a sense. It's made up of several persons and boards and stuff. They place enough importance to say, okay, we should have this in the collection, or we should be thinking about, having this conversation about this particular region, and the art that's being made there. So it's more like being written into a story, a bigger story, which is something I feel like, countries like ours, because we're smaller and we're kind of peripheral, we have always had that desire, and maybe it's not always easy to achieve, to become part of a bigger conversation, So hopefully that's happening more now. and the road ahead is leading in that direction, So yeah, let's hope.
Jay, you have your work in museums. You've been like commissioned from St. James to do a piece for them. All these big jobs. Which one? How to say? Which one meant the most to you, or which one felt most valuable?
Well, the last, the interesting thing, even though, well, it is an interesting thing. The irony is that I've been practicing for a very long time, I'm in my 50s now. And this is all very recent, This is just like, you're looking at me in my 50s, but then it's almost like you're talking to a young artist just now emerging, actually. That's actually what it is. I'm literally now, now coming out into the world. Right? So I'm considered, an emerging artist.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a few years, and a lot of good things have happened in those years, and I would project growth moving forward. But I feel like I think the most satisfying thing for me in the last few years has been what I kind of alluded to earlier, which was that your work leads. The work creates conversations that you don't have to start in person because your work is starting that conversation on its own. And I think that is the most rewarding thing. It's not like, I have to go and say this or pitch this, and I feel that aspect is what it feels rewarding for me. So when the St. James Church in Piccadilly in the UK wrote to me, And it was already a decision that they had made. I know something I had applied for, but they knew what I was doing. The people who were involved in the project were, obviously cognizant of what I do. So that I find interesting, because that is a conversation that's happening without necessarily you being involved, but your work is leading that conversation for you. So by the time they wrote to me, they already thought, well, if you agree to it, we would love for you to do this commission. And this is a permanent commission in the middle of London at this church that's honoring this gentleman called Otuba Kuguano, who was an ex-slave who became a free man in London, was captured in Ghana, I believe, was close to Trinidad and Grenada before he made it back to London. Got baptized in that church 250 years ago, and they wanted to honor him. And part of that honoring was going to be this permanent collection, this permanent artwork that they were going to put up in the church in his honor. And I'm sure there were many artists that they considered, and somehow or the other it ended up being, they ended up liking what I was doing. They were speaking to them in some type of way to be in that, in a space like that, which is kind of incredible when you think about it, But like I said, it wasn't something that I was aware of. The work led that, and that made it feel more gratifying that it was just a conversation that the work was having with whoever was looking at it. So I feel like that project is telling in that way, and because it's an intersection of histories and worlds, the church, which is not the most straightforward institution when you think about the history of it, and yet I am the type of person that I believe in redemption. I believe in change. I believe in becoming better, and I believe the world could become a better place, and that includes institutions that might not always have been great or done the best things. So I don't go into something like to look at. Yes, you got to face the truth of what things are, but I'm always one to believe in how can you step forward? How can you move forward from a less fortunate past? So having the paintings up there and having that dialogue, which is about uplifting and moving forward and acknowledging, this gentleman, as well as acknowledging his story. And then having me as a Trinidadian, and a Caribbean person of kind of mixed ethnicity. I'm a African and an Indian and a Trinidad. We are this type of society. I feel like it's a good symbol for us. And it's a good symbol for them to have, I guess, an artist like myself from this part of the world speak about. And to have a presence in a church like that, speaking about their history, and speaking about spirituality, and God. Yeah. So it is, yeah. Mm. So maybe, I'm saying all of that to say maybe that project stands out for me in my head in the last few years as something, and it's permanent. So that's amazing. That feels like it's going to be there after I'm gone. So that's already something that's there.
That's so cool.
And when they commission you on, excuse my ignorance, but when they commission you to do this, you're doing something new for it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So they're giving you a deadline. So you had to work with that. How is that?
Yeah. I mean, it was a pretty tight. I would have liked more time, but
How long was it?
I think I worked on them for about 9 months. And there were four large pieces,
Tight.
Yeah, so it's tight.
A year and a half.
Yeah. So it was a tighter deadline, much tighter than normal, which is interesting that they did it with that deadline. But that's how these things go sometimes, I guess, in terms of what their organizing committee was doing in the commission stage, I guess. It ended up being a little bit tight on time. However, I feel, I've always said about that particular project that I love I love to have a little extra time to reflect on what I'm doing and slow the pace down so that when it's done, I feel like, okay, I'm settled about that. But, it also made me draw on something that I felt I had inside, and I needed to be very direct and clear about it and let it come out, I couldn't mess around and be like second guessing it. So it made me approach the painting slightly differently, like in a more direct way. And sometimes when you're under pressure, you draw on your instinct, and you call on something that's less about being deliberate or considered or overanalyzing. You call on something higher than that or beyond that, which is just like, I know I could do this and I'm just going to let it flow to me. I think I approached that like that. I mean, and I'm happy that it landed on its feet, because you don't know. It's a little nerve-wracking because, my God, this thing is going to be up forever. If you're not satisfied that it is there it's like a, yeah. So anyway, I didn't let that part of it. I didn't let that part of it affect me too much. Thankfully, I was really. I felt like I kept it close to what I was doing anyway. They had seen my paintings, obviously, that I'd been working on for the last 5 years. So they were familiar with the type of themes that I work with and how I made the images and stuff like that. So I kind of kept things in that zone. So at least I had a little bit of a comfort zone to work in, while I knew I had to kind of get them finished and feel satisfied about them. But in the end, it worked out, If you'll ever go to London next period of time, we have a long time, but yeah, make sure go and see them.
It looks crazy. I saw the pictures.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Real cool. So while we're on the topic of like commissioning and work for other people, like how did the rum collaboration come about?
That came about through that was led through an interest that the CEO of that company called Vellier, which is an Italian company, that they're known for vintage rums. I mean, the rum world is not a world that I know very well, but somebody pointed him in my direction in terms of his interest in art from this part of the world. I had visited here, and in a couple of discussions with him, realized that he had acquired many decades ago the last set of casks of rum from the Carnival distillery here in Trinidad. And this is something that companies do, they buy, aged rums from, well, sometimes defunct distilleries, but maybe just from distilleries in period, like all over the world, and then repackage it and market it. So in talking to him about that, but he was interested in my paintings first. It wasn't really, the project didn't start there. He was interested in purchasing some of my work, and this was just a little bit before I had representation with a gallery and stuff like that. So it was still kind of this direct discussion. And so he did subsequently get some artwork from me. And the conversation over a couple of years just grew, because I think he had always had this idea that these very last 21 casks that they were going to release, that he wanted to do something a little different with them. Apparently these rums become very, very valuable and go into auctions and all these sorts of things, like collecting rum on that level is like art, I guess, I did not realize that, but I came very quickly to realize that this is actually something people take very seriously. And so I understood, the concept he had, which was like, hey, if I did even a series of paintings on these bottles, it's going to connect it with the place it's from, and it will make it more special in a sense, more valuable, and thereby more expensive, more valuable, more rare, everything, And at first, I think the first initial idea was to maybe do something where, he would use different Caribbean artists. I don't know, he had many different ideas. And honestly, I was not, again, this is one of those things where it wasn't like a process of discussing how he wanted to do it. I think my work was out there. I think he could see what I had. By this point, I have a prolific amount of some bodies of work out there that people could see and say, okay, there are quite a few images out there and they're strong enough to kind of cover some ground. And I think the conversation grew out of that, meaning I feel he said to himself, maybe this artist can do this, and then we started discussions then. And I gave them access to a pool of images of my work. And I knew there were going to be 21 images because there were 21 casts, and each of those casts has a limited amount of bottles, maybe like 200 or something, so they're quite rare. And then the paintings will go on each of those bottles, and so I thought, this is I didn't really get excited until it was a done deal, because you know how these things are. Yeah. I didn't really tell it to I didn't talk about it to anyone until it was actually happening, and it was a go. But I do think that it's a great kind of conversation to have. I think the rums were from here. Subsequently, the media here asked me about whether they thought if it was a local company that bought it, whether they would have a collaboration list. And I said, well, I can't answer that. I don't know. Nobody has ever approached me about doing a collaboration like that here. But I think what I did say is that it's something we should learn from too, in terms of the value of what we have, and about using our resources to their fullest to develop where we're from is very important, and this shows that, because of course there would be a lot of naysayers who say, well, why does these people up there have that rum? We should have had that rum. This could be going to our economy, and I agree. But these are mistakes that sometimes we make, and these are decisions we make, and we have to live with our decisions, and we have to try to make decisions moving forward that hopefully help develop us, and help us realize our potential. So, but the paintings are there, the rum is there, it's from here, they're rare, and, I think only positive things can happen from that, moving forward. So, I'm happy to have done the project, like point blank. I mean, there's even though there's been these different viewpoints about it. Yeah.
The bottle's fresh.
Yeah. They're real cool.
So, as you're talking about all this sort of international work you've been getting, I saw you say in probably an interview with some news outlet or something, where you said either Chinese or Caribbean people set their standards locally. Meaning, I guess what I got from that is that they're restricting their excellence locally. So I want to touch on the topic of why you chose to stay in Trinidad.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that comes up because so many artists, and not only artists, but people in different fields have had to leave the Caribbean to seek, better opportunities outside. And in a sense, I think there's always, for a large percentage of those people, there's a heavy heart sometimes, I think, because home is home, and, these are developing places. You feel like you want to build your home, you want to develop, you want to be part of that development, part of that, creating a society, creating a little civilization, whatever. And, so when you have to leave or you feel like there's not enough opportunity, I'm sure there's always a little heavy heart. And I've noticed a lot of people now interested in coming back to the Caribbean, even though they've worked outside for like a decade, having left here, going to school up there, getting into working there, whether it's in the science fields or in the arts. This coming back here to work in this context seems to always be something that they are drawn to, as an idea. And I feel that is encouraging, because I feel that there was a time when it was like, nah, but this place have nothing for me, and if I could get a chance, I gone, and I've had opportunities to leave, and I did not take those opportunities in that type of way. I mean, if I could get the opportunity to travel, I'll travel, yes. But I felt like I wanted this to be where I discovered the world from, and definitely from an artistic point of view, this is what I wanted to paint. I wanted to paint from here, and I wanted to paint this experience. I felt the experience living here is rich enough, interesting enough. It's not so predictable. It's not your regular, like what the image that we paint of, sometimes we see painted of the Caribbean is like, slow and, everything is slow and boring. It's like a place to retire. We know that it's not Trinidad, right? So Trinidad is a dynamic place with a lot of energy and color and nuance and characters, and there's a lot to work with here. So I didn't want to leave that. I don't feel like I would be happy, trying to find a new place to work from, and a new way to work. At least that's not how I feel now, and I haven't felt that in my life yet, I can't imagine it changing. But, I never like to say never. So I feel with that in mind, I think logically. I think logically sometimes. And from a logical point of view, especially with the internet, especially with the communication age that we have, I don't see why somebody can't do something from a geographic location that is not where everything is necessarily happening in a field or not,
Connected.
Because we're connected, you can have conversations like daily, sometimes too many, what I mean? So I think it's a question of coming back to the craft itself and the work itself, and what can you produce that excites, that surprises, that that shares something from this place to the world that can, move someone. And I feel you could do it from here. I feel it's possible to do it from here. I don't think it's something that you have to be in those centers for. And I think this trajectory in my career has proven that. I work here. I'm able to travel to maybe do some things here as well. But I'm able to have more of a kind of global approach to showing the work, to having conversations about the work, to looking at the possibilities of where the work can go to. So Trinidad is still a conversation that I would like to have. Trinidad and Tobago is still the center of what I feel we should all be thinking about, building. Like what you guys are doing, it's about valuing us. It's about giving us that value. And if that value is always taken somewhere else and shared with another place, and we don't share it to ourselves, I think we lose out. I don't think we gain from that. So it's as simple as that, really. And we have a chance to put some of that energy back into building here, and we need it. This is a place that really, really, really needs, all the thinking, all the ideas, all the initiatives that we could come up with, all the encouragement that we could give the younger generation, and people who have been working, people who are looking for an opportunity to build and to be part of here and not give up on here, We have it all there in front of us. So I think we have to take it seriously. And taking it seriously means kind of rooting yourself here a bit, I find. Yeah.
Do you think producing art outside would impact the art?
Yeah, I think it would. I feel like it's not that you couldn't make, like I couldn't be located somewhere and make paintings about Trinidad, but I will be making them from memory.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be the same as being here, because I always see myself as working primarily in the present. I think it's very much about the things I'm experiencing now. Even if I'm looking at an old image or old photograph, I'm still bringing it into this moment in time. And the work always feels urgent and immediate in that way, even though I'm expecting that hopefully if I make something, that the image could last and it wouldn't feel like, okay, it was just for this moment and it's gone, or that it doesn't stand up, in 10 years. Good songs last forever, right? And that's what one would aim to do in painting as well. But it's just the way that I work is that a lot of my developments in how I make my art have been tied to a kind of character in Trinidad, a characteristic, the way we are, the way we speak, the way we dance, the way I'm interested in the body. So those things, I have to find them here. I can't find them if I'm not here, If those are the things that are animating my work, then it is here that I have to discover them, I have started to use my own body, in my work to act out things, to become closer to the things that I paint. So instead of I'm looking at something over there and I'm painting it like a traditional artist would, what if I act that out and I photograph that or I video that and get a sense of what it is to make that movement? I think when I paint it, I will be I'd have more intimate knowledge of what that movement feels like, whatever it be. I think those things speak to being here. And I think that is at the center of my work, really. So I think I have to, that's the first thing I admit to myself, is that the work, the subject really is this place in a way.
Actually, I really must tell you, thank you, and I love you for staying in Trinidad. I feel you set such a good example, because I feel Trinidad is a place that suffers immensely from brain drain and creative drain, or whatever kind of drain. And you, with the success you've seen, I feel people looking outside at you, they'll be like, wait, now I can actually stay here and do something.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I think it's, and you're right. We do have to create, you have to create examples. People have to see that it's possible. And once you see it's possible, then it becomes possible, right? And some of us have to sometimes lead that charge. I'm lucky in the sense that I grew up, with thinkers around me, like my dad, who saw Trinidad and the Caribbean as their center. So it's an idea and an ideology that wasn't foreign to me. I didn't have to struggle through anybody who was telling me otherwise, and that's one of the benefits of, giving yourself knowledge, or being around, giving knowledge and sharing knowledge to those around you, because it also empowers them to possibly examine those ideas, So I definitely got to, very naturally feel like this is the center, so that everything that I was doing, even if I was catching hell, I was still I still had faith in it, Wasn't just going to let it go because it was hard. I was just like, it's hard because, that's how it is when you have to build something from ground up. It's difficult, you don't just get it ready-made. That's what independence means. We are guiding this country to where we want it to go. And we are all part of that conversation, and we all have to contribute to building that, So that dialogue has to keep going. We have to be serious about that. And I feel myself being part of that, the things that I'm doing, working, teaching, having the discussions, encouraging people to be, to be present and to be serious about what they're doing is very important for us, because either that, or we're looking for somebody to sort of give us a handout or give us a bly, or when I say not a bly, give us a handicap, like you say earlier, you all are small, so I'll give you a little. I actually think we can be as potent, as powerful, as present, as valuable, as anyone in the world. I was saying this to somebody the other day. I was like, one of the things you have to use sometimes to sort of to give yourself that confidence, and to find belief is to think about it like this. You know, if somebody's making a painting in Italy or in the States or anywhere in the world, they're using the same canvas, they're using the same paints, they're using the same, they don't have an up on you on anything, you know, and sometimes Trinidadians use these excuses like, well, you know, boy, over there, a production thing. I mean, you guys doing your thing here, you're making it happen. Yes, you could have, you know, you might want a different studio, but that's not going to change the content and the quality of what you do, honestly. I don't think so, you know. Something that's lo-fi can be just as relevant and probably more so than something that's super polished that has no soul, you know? So we have to kind of look at what is the content that we're creating. And I say the content we're creating, you know, the thing that we're creating and what our imagination can bring alive is really where we have to focus. We're using the same paints and the same canvas. So what is stopping you? The only thing is stopping is you and how you're approaching it, you know? And maybe something that, you know, a way of thinking from the past that has kept you thinking, well, you know what? You know, I'm not as good as that, you know what I mean? You know, them fellas, them is the real fellas, you know what I mean? That's the real thing out there, you know? And this is not really this is, come on, man, you know, in Trinidad, man, come on, man, you know? But I think, you know, I don't believe that. No part of me ever believed that, you know. Who knows what's going to emerge from the Caribbean? Maybe some of the greatest artists that ever lived, you know. So that's how I think.
Beautiful. Beautiful. As you mentioned, that idea of making Trinidad your base was kind of inculcated into you from your father. How was it growing up? Because I'm sure in your life, there was a period where you were just Earl's son, and then now you're Chick.
Yeah.
Right? So how was those first couple of years? Correct?
Yeah, interestingly, that's a good question. And, you know, I've never suffered from that kind of being overshadowed by my dad thing. You know, thankfully, I think what happened was that because of the surfing, like the surfing early on, I was young, I had this identity that was my own, you know, and so no matter what, this thing was like my own. There's nobody else doing that, you know what I mean? Yeah. That was just mine, you know, and they couldn't compare it. You couldn't draw parallel to anybody. It just was just something that just landed, and I just connected it, you know, and I felt that as a young person. And I felt very grateful and fortunate. I never used to stop saying thanks. I still say thanks every single day about that. You know, I'll be like, dude, I don't know how that happened, but real grateful for that, you know. And yeah, so that really, you know, gave me a sense that, you know, you're an individual and you have your own graces and your own stuff to work with, your own potential. You know, you're not working underneath anybody or in anybody's shadow, and that really has been helpful. You know, because I know sometimes that could be difficult with young people if they have strong figures around them. I've grown up with some strong figures around me. You know, even other artists that you have to kind of like. You have to like what they do and respect them, but you have to also stay a little far from them too. You know, you have to keep building your thing. You know, you don't want to get too dragged into somebody's orbit where you can't pull out. It's like a planet, you know, that in the orbit of a sun, and then all of a sudden you're just serving that. You know, you have to be your own. You have to be your own sun. You have your own fire. You know, and I think that's something that once you think it, that's the first part. Just think it, and then you start to just work and put things in place, and it could come with little things, you know, because the thing is that we are unique, you know. It's just sometimes things happen to, you know, sort of push us down a bit that we start to doubt it, you know. But that uniqueness is there, and I think that is the thing we have to celebrate and look for in ourselves. Those little nuances is what makes us, you know, so special. And then that's yours alone. It's yours alone to own and to carry forward, you know. So thankfully I never had that with like, let's say my dad or even other artists and stuff like that. I really managed to, thankfully, you know, just kind of keep even if it get pulled in a little bit, I kind of, you know. And somebody, I remember telling somebody, and something saying, they say, you know, how is it to walk in the shadow? I say, I don't walk in shadow, I walk in light. Because you can get light from somebody, you know, it don't have to be a shadow, you know. So I tend to look at the things that have shone on me, you know, from the people, the strong people that I've had around, you know. If I think of Leroy and I think of my dad and I think of, I mean, would Leroy have liked it, or would he have said no if I became like a disciple of what he did? He would have probably think, because that's a great, like, let's say, you know, artists have ego, you know, be like, oh my God, you know, I have a follower, you know, which is great. And that happens, you know, no big deal. But for myself, I knew that I need to find my path, you know, and did that diminish our relationship? It didn't. It, you know, so what I got was certain amount of light, not shadow. You know, and that was how it was been for most of the people around me. Yeah.
As you talked about the uniqueness, right? I remember some interview I saw you say how your art doesn't only stem from formal questions, but from questions of who am I? I don't know if that's too deep, but who are you?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I get the question, because I think painting and art is a kind of metaphor for your character. It's a stand-in for, it is reflective of who you are. It's a language, eh? It's like a language. It's like saying, you know, Kristen, write something about yourself. You're using a language to speak about something that's internal, that is unseen. It's just something you feel in, right? It's just, we don't know what this looks like. This consciousness tells us what it is, right? It's just, yeah, I feel like myself. I have these thoughts. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, sometimes they're a little bit sideways. Who the hell knows? But to give that any shape, you have to use a language, you know? And so that's why I think, you know, these types of processes in art where, like, let's say in the 90s, when I came back from Martinique and I started, I was very frustrated with the paintings that I was making. I couldn't make any paintings that I was satisfied with. And I was making regular paintings where you stretch them on the canvas like that, on the stretcher, you canvases, painting, oil paintings. And I was just not getting anywhere. I just wasn't satisfied at all. But there were little pieces of things of who I was happening, different, but bringing them together it wasn't working. So what I did, and I always remember this, and this is so important, such an important gesture for me as an artist, because it really paved the way for view of myself, and how my work might evolve and what it might turn into. Because I started taking the paintings off the stretchers and I started cutting them up. You know, a little bit frustrated. It's like, you know, you're cutting up something because you're really pissed off. It is like, my God, these things are shit, just shit. You know what I mean? I can't. And part of it was that, but part of it was, because I wasn't doing that to throw them in the garbage. I was doing that to transform them, to turn them into, give me a new way to see this information that I had made, you know? These paintings just weren't speaking to me, so I had to kind of like literally cut them up and maybe look at them anyway. And you know what happened is that I cut those things up, whether they were pieces of paper, canvases, I pulled them off the stretchers, and I had them on the studio floor like that, and I started sewing them back together in different ways. And to me, that speaks about that individuality, that same fragment, those fragments that make us up. You know, I think we're very complex as a people and as a region because of the type of history we have, the things that inform us, the type of music, the variety of things that inform us. It's not linear at all. And that sort of plural experience of how we see the world, all those things coming in, makes us into who we are. And we have to find always ways to express that. It's not easy. You know, it's just like how words fail you sometimes. And I wanted to say this thing, I want just not find any words, you know. It's because of that complexity. And art helps, you know, process some of that. So yes, you know, part of that, you know, finding a metaphor for that layered self is coming through these fragments that I'm putting together. And it started in the 90s with those, what I then became like almost like these tapestries of sewn together bits of me, you know, and in them you would see a bit of a painting, a bit of a landscape, a bit of I started sewing little pieces of like, I would have like some toys, you know, some cowboys and Indians, and I put them in a little plastic pouch, and I'll sew that onto the painting as part of me. This is, you know, all these parts. And that became, like, I would say, one of my more important bodies of work. You know, I made several large pieces with that type of energy. And I think that energy and that approach is still in the work that I'm making now, because I'm using these panels, which I play with. And I start the paintings by just being really free and exploring different parts of how I feel. You know, whether it's just, you know, unconsciously and subconsciously, and then some things very consciously. Those are all the layers that are making me up, right? So I could play with them and all these different things, and then I try to bring them together and carry it a step forward. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how the language works to address, you know, this layered self. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, that was good.
Do you mind, like, if I pull up a painting, you mind like explaining it to me? Because like I have no kind of art, anything.
I don't know explaining it, but
explain like what your mind, where your mind was at when you did it. Because it's one that I like.
Okay.
He likes as well.
Okay, yeah. We can take a look at it. Sure. Let's see if I could share.
The same one you want to
okay.
If I could share a little bit of information that I'll try, sure. I mean, most paintings have a little story behind them. When I say a little story, there's something that...
this one.
Oh, that one. Okay, yeah. That's a cool one. Yeah, man. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, man. So, yeah.
I saw this one when I was looking up you and researching, and I don't know what it is, but it stood out to me. Sent it to him. He liked it too, but you know, I can't really like explain why.
Why?
Yeah,
You see how people be in an art gallery and they be like, you know, this is really making me feel like this. And over here, I get what the artist was saying. I don't have that shit at all.
I don't have it. But the one thing that it does stand out, like it feels like whoever this is, they're at peace.
Yes.
Right. And it's called The Breath or whatever.
The Breath, yeah. So I wanted, exactly.
So what was going on when you put together this?
So this was something that I made two versions of it. This is the large version, the final version that I made, and I made a smaller version. And what I liked about it, or what I was drawn to, was, you know, how close I am to the body, first of all. So I feel like I'm right there. Or that could be me. It's like, you know, when I say it could be me, there's no big distance between me and the figure, you know? So I like that intimacy and closeness. And then because of that, the breath, you know, like you're so close that you could feel this person is alive, you know? And maybe that was something that was driving me with the piece, that the closeness to the figure. But I like, you know, maybe I was thinking about, you know, how would I visualize dreaming? You know, how would I visualize, you know, a mental state? You know, I thought that was what it was, because the figure is there and you could feel the figure there, but then everything around it is sort of fragmented and moving and colorful. I also thought, you know, being a person who is very much into the tradition of carnival and performance and juve and those things, I believe those traditions are very important part of who we are, you know, and how we express ourselves and how we see ourselves. And I feel like this also could feel like, you know, a masquerader is just lying down, and these are like the colors. These are the colors they're still seeing. This is what they're still feeling. That's probably an interpretation. That's also an interpretation of this painting. I feel that I teased as well, like as a possible like generator behind it in terms of my own thinking, because I have to say, I don't make paintings with specific intentions.
Right.
It's really a process where it's leading me, it leads me. I have some beginnings and little things that I like to put out there. I like this figure. I like how this looks. I will start with that. I don't know what it might end up looking like. I don't know like all the things that might happen to me in the process of doing it, right? That is where the work starts to become its own in a way. And it's guiding me and I'm guiding it, and that's honestly that's my favorite way to work. I don't like to say, okay, I'm going for this and this is what I'm looking for. So I'm going to like always push everything aside so I could find this. I hardly ever work like that, So this reveal itself kind of like the figure, like I said, the closeness to the figure, but then where's the figure? What is the figure doing? And I mean, the figure is dreaming, and the figure is breathing as well. And it's alive. It's a kind of space that is alive, whether it's a post-Juve and the colors of Juve and that kind of exuberance is still vibrating and breathing, or it's somebody at peace dreaming, So it has a little kind of like the cosmic feel, Yeah. Cosmic feel.
Very ambiguous.
I like that. Yeah. It leaves a lot of the interpretation, but that's good,
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to. I think artworks should have several readings. I don't think they all have to have one reading. I think you could have a reading and it's true, but there could also be different ways that a viewer approaches it that opens up different things and different questions. I think good artworks are a little bit open like that, rather than, well, this is what it is and it's locked into that interpretation only. Mm-hmm. That's usually how the paintings that I'm drawn to are very enigmatic paintings. The things that I almost can never figure out. I'm actually more drawn to that because I will always want to look at it. Mm-hmm. I think there must always be just that little, you're walking on the fine line of getting a feeling from it. It's definitely giving you a reaction, but understanding. You see, I think maybe understanding is a little overrated in terms of when you're talking about art. And maybe you don't have to understand. I think it's more important to feel, to have a response to rather than to understand. Because sometimes I might not understand it, but I feel it, and what I create is geared towards the senses, rather than the intellect in that way. Let me understand what this is about. And I mean, it's kind of cool to hear people talk about paintings with that type of intellect and that type of understanding. It doesn't take away from that, but for me, it's not the central part of what I'm trying to achieve,
So that brings us to the end of episode 13 of the Odyssey podcast. Today we had the pleasure of sitting down with Che Lovelace, having a wonderful conversation. He did a very good job of summarizing his vast experiences and knowledge, as well as his vibrant and eventful life into about 2 hours, a little bit more than 2 hours, for you guys to watch and listen and enjoy. And Jay, I just want to say thank you for taking this time out of this important day to come and speak with us. And I really hope you enjoyed it as much as we did.
Well, man, I'm really happy to do it. I mean, from time Ela told me about it, and then I looked at it because but I'll be honest with you. A lot of times I avoid. I know that I avoid. I believe everything I said in that interview. About building here and stuff. But I'm also real serious about calling something out if it's not up to mark or it's not feeling right. I like what you're doing because it feels sincere and it feels straightforward, and I like that comes across. I can look at people and feel that quick. I can't deal with it. Well, that thing. You know what I mean? It's be too much, dude. And a lot of times, like we feel like we need to have this big performance behind things, and maybe that works for some people. But I am a little careful with that because I like the fact that and a lot of times you go to speak with people and they don't They don't do any research on who, on what you are, what you're doing. They don't show you that respect. You know what I mean? And I've seen that with a lot with people who are like world famous people, from here. Whether they're writers and singers and they go to an interview and the interviewer just kind of like, they didn't do their homework. I did my homework. That's why I'm here, to share something that I've been doing. But you ain't do yours because you ain't really looking to nothing to ask me anything interesting, to sort of have an interesting conversation, because it's probably people calling me. It's a job, right? I mean, when I say it's part of a project, interviewer, I think it's such an interesting, position to be in, because sometimes interviews go amazing, and then sometimes they're like, that depends on the people, the chemistry of the people. Yeah, so it's a very subtle thing. And sometimes it can just not work, you know what I mean? And it just is not that interesting, And I've done things where I don't find them interesting. I just like, it's okay, but, it's just not, I don't feel anything has happened. And I'm not saying that it's easy, but nothing is easy, So I think what I liked about it is that I felt like there was enough sincerity in terms of how you all approached it, and humility, to kind of create a conversation, you know what I mean? And I think that is where I kind of, because I still say no to a lot of these things because I check the people who doing this and I'd be like, nah, I'm not on that kind of loud up scene, It is be too loud up, and then the substance is not there. Yeah. So, it's not an ad we're doing, you know what I mean? You don't need to, it's not about that, If you want to big them up, let's get into the substance of what you begin me about. You know what I mean? And I think that I saw the potential for that in this type of formats as well. So I'm glad I did it. I'm really happy I did it. I'm happy I did it. Thank you guys. I appreciate this one. Nice, yes, man. And keep it up.
Thank you. Thanks. And once again, we just like to say thank you to all the viewers. The Odyssey podcast wouldn't be possible without you guys. We really appreciate all the kind words and the support. And if you like this episode, please like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You could follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And you could also listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you want to check out Che and his work, you could check him on Instagram at Che Lovelace, or you could just Google him. There are plenty of stuff there. And yeah, I mean, thanks again. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
We'll see you next time.